I've been restoring old houses for over 20 years. I've seen rot, mold, vermin infestations, even stumbled onto an old bomb shelter filled with mannequin parts once. But nothing ever rattled me like what happened last fall. The property was a late 19th century Victorian mansion in rural Pennsylvania, abandoned for decades. Locals called it the Grayson House, after the original owners. The place had that typical haunted look: peeling paint, broken windows, vines choking the facade, but that never fazed me. To me, it was just another job. The client was a New York investor who wanted to flip it into a bed and breakfast. I was hired to lead the restoration, working mostly alone during the first phase. The first couple weeks were business as usual. I cleared debris, checked the structure, cataloged architectural details. The house was frozen in time, untouched since maybe the 1950s. Newspapers, furniture, even dishes still in the sink. That's when things started getting weird. I was in one of the upstairs bedrooms, prying up the rotted floorboards, when I noticed something wedged in the wall cavity. It was a child's shoe, old and worn, but clean, almost too clean. Then I found a second one in the wall across the hall. Later that day in the attic, I found a series of small wooden boxes nailed to the beams. Inside each one was a dead bird, wrapped in yellowed fabric, placed like an offering. The smell wasn't even that bad, like the air up there had been dead for a long time. I chalked it up to superstition. Old houses often had weird traditions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The real shift came on a rainy Thursday. I was working late, trying to finish a new subfloor in the parlor. As I hammered, I felt this pressure, like someone was standing behind me. I turned. No one. The house was dead silent except for the tapping rain. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement on the grand staircase, just a flicker. A shadow that ducked away as soon as I looked. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" Nothing. No sound. No shift in air. The next day, I brought in motion sensor cameras just to ease my own mind. I set one in the hallway, one at the top of the stairs, and one in the parlor. That night, I reviewed the footage. For hours, nothing. Then around 2:17 a.m., I caught something on the hallway cam. A figure. It wasn't clear, but it was there, about 5 feet tall, standing just outside the door of the room where I'd found the shoes. No movement, no sound. Just watching. And then it slowly faded backward into the darkness. The last straw came a week later. I was sanding a banister when I noticed a pattern in the dust on the floor. Footprints. Bare. Small. Leading from the base of the stairs into the hall, and ending directly behind me. But no prints going the other way. I stood up fast. My skin went cold. The air felt thick, like walking into a room where someone had just been crying. I backed up slowly, tools in hand, heart pounding. That's when I heard it. A voice. Soft. Whispery. Like a child humming a lullaby from somewhere upstairs. I packed my tools and left. Told the investor I wouldn't be continuing. He thought I was crazy until I sent him the footage. He sold the house 3 weeks later. To this day, I don't know what I disturbed in that place. But I know one thing for certain. That house was watching me. And something inside it didn't want to be forgotten. I told myself I wouldn't go back. The footage was enough: the low-resolution figure watching from the hallway, the sound of footsteps where there should have been silence, that humming. But curiosity is a disease. It doesn't go away, it festers in the quiet hours, especially for someone like me, someone who spends their life in the bones of dead buildings, coaxing stories from the dust. For weeks, I kept the memory at arm's length. I buried myself in another job upstate, a simpler one, a 1910 farmhouse with sunlit windows and cheerful wallpaper beneath the grime. But every night, no matter how tired I was, I'd dream of the Grayson house. Of narrow staircases leading nowhere, of doorways shifting when I blinked, of a voice always just out of earshot whispering my name from behind the walls. By mid-October, the dreams had turned obsessive. I began sketching the house from memory: the curvature of the staircase, the ornate ceiling medallions, the cracked plaster in the west parlor ceiling. But each time, my hand would draw things that weren't there: rooms I never entered, hallways that never existed. One sketch in particular I'll never forget: a basement door beneath the staircase. It wasn't in the original floor plan. I would have seen it. Yet my pencil insisted otherwise. And worse, I found myself drawing faces. Not full, not clear, just glimpses. Eyes, always the eyes. Small, too wide, peering through cracks or from the base of closets. Watching me. I didn't want to go back. But I had to. The house hadn't sold. The investor who'd bought it and tried to flip it had gone quiet. His email bounced. His number rang endlessly. According to public records, the deed was still in his name, but taxes had gone unpaid. The Grayson house sat dormant, wrapped in mist and neglect, like nothing had ever happened. I went on a Sunday. Gray skies, rain in the forecast. I told no one. The front gate was exactly as I left it, rusted, slightly ajar, half-eaten by the hedges. The house loomed behind it like a carcass. Windows dark, shingles hanging loose like flayed skin, the porch sagging deeper than before. Something in the air felt wrong. Not just decay, something charged. Like static. Like being underwater. I approached slowly, passing the stone fountain in the yard. It had been dry when I first came, filled with leaves and dead insects. But now inexplicably the basin was full. Not flowing, just full. Still water, dark and smooth like oil. I stood over it, staring down. And that's when I saw the reflection. Not mine. Someone behind me. Small. Standing completely still. I spun around. Nothing. Inside, the air was heavier than I remembered. Not musty, worse. Sour. Like something had spoiled and been left to rot in the walls. My boots echoed as I walked across the warped floorboards, each step a slow protest. The tarps I'd left over the furniture were untouched. Tools still sat in a neat pile by the fireplace. It was like the house had been frozen since the day I left. Except one thing had changed. The footprints were back. The same small, bare ones, but now they were tracked in mud, not dust. They weaved down the hallway into the dining room, then disappeared beneath the floor. I followed. The dining room was dim, the curtains thick with grime. The chandelier above sagged slightly, as though something had hung from it for too long. I stepped carefully, flashlight in hand, beam tracing the ornate woodwork and floral wallpaper faded to sepia. The footprints ended in the center of the room. Right where my sketch said the basement door should be. I knelt. There was nothing obvious, no handle, no latch, just an uninterrupted stretch of floorboards. But as I pressed my palm against them, I felt it, a faint draft. Cold. Coming from beneath. And then the floor creaked behind me. Slow. Deliberate. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My body refused to obey. The creaking moved in a semicircle, slow steps across the room, until they stopped directly in front of me. The flashlight flickered. I smelled lilacs. And then I heard it. A breath. Right against my face. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this story. I stayed frozen in that half kneel, one hand still pressed to the cool wood, the other gripping the flashlight so tightly it creaked beneath my fingers. The breath I felt, soft, deliberate, had that unmistakable human weight to it. Not wind. Not imagination. The exhale of something alive. Or something that remembered what it was to be alive. I finally looked up. There was nothing. No figure. No shadow. Just the air, denser now, like I was underwater. Like I was breathing someone else's memory. And then I saw the scratch marks. They weren't there before. Not during the first restoration, not in any of the walkthroughs. But now, carved crudely into the base of the dining room wall, just beside the fireplace, were dozens of shallow, jagged gouges. Like someone had clawed the wall in desperation. The pattern wasn't random, it spiraled. Small hands. Maybe children's. The plaster crumbled slightly when I touched it. Something black and sticky oozed from one of the deeper scratches. I backed away. I didn't want to keep going. But the house, it felt like it needed me to. I returned to the center of the room and began tapping along the floor with the handle of a hammer from my kit. Hollow. Just slightly, but enough. I traced the sound, looking for seams in the wood. Finally, near the table's edge, I found a barely visible cut, a square panel, perhaps 2 feet by 2, perfectly integrated with the floorboards. No latch. No hinges. Just there. I dug my fingers into the groove and pulled. The wood was stiff. Swollen from moisture, or maybe simply resistant. But I forced it open. And when it gave, it let out a gasp. Not a creak. Not a groan. A gasp. Like the air itself had been sealed in for 100 years and was now exhaling its history. Inside was a shaft. Narrow. Just big enough for a grown man to descend if he crouched. The walls were lined with stone, damp and sweating. A wooden ladder, old and brittle, clung to one side. The smell rising up was foul, deeper than mildew, older than rot. Something animal. Something buried. I hesitated at the edge. I could feel my heart thudding against my ribs like a warning drum. But then, impossibly faint, I heard it again. The humming. Lower this time. Slower. Like it was being sung through layers of earth. A lullaby missing its last note. I climbed down. The ladder creaked with every step, but held. The shaft descended farther than I expected, 20 feet at least, and opened into a chamber of rough stone. The temperature dropped fast, the air damp and unmoving, like the earth had closed its mouth behind me. My flashlight beam scanned the room. Stone walls, lined with what looked like shelves or niches. Not for storage, they were too small. More like shrines. On one, A child's porcelain doll, face cracked in half, one blue glass eye missing. On another, a rosary twisted into a knot, half melted. A third held a single leather shoe, blackened with age. And then I saw the drawings. Hundreds of them. Charcoal sketches, smeared and overlapping, covering nearly every inch of the far wall. Some were stick figures with swollen heads and staring eyes. Others were more detailed faces contorted in fear, long staircases, doorways leading into pitch black. In several drawings, a small child stood alone. Alone. Always watched from behind. And in one near the center, drawn with clearer lines than the rest, was me. Or someone who looked very much like me. Same build. Same hat. Same work belt with tools hanging at the hip. Standing at the top of a staircase, flashlight in hand. But in the drawing I was not alone. A long figure stood behind me, arms too long, face obscured by a veil of charcoal. I reached out to touch it. The wall was warm. Then a sound. Not the humming. Something new. A thump. Followed by a dragging noise. Slow, rhythmic. From the far end of the chamber, just beyond the edge of my flashlight beam. I stepped backward. The noise continued: thump, drag, and then a laugh. Small. Feminine. But wrong. Like it was being played through a broken music box. It echoed through the chamber with no clear source, bouncing around the stone like it was trying to confuse me. I turned to climb the ladder, but it was gone. The shaft above me was bricked over. Seamless. As if it had never been open. As if the house had never let me in. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by stone and silence, staring at the wall where the ladder used to be. It was gone. Not collapsed, not hidden, simply not there. The bricks were dry, tight-fitted, and old, as if they'd been set a century ago. No sign of a hatch. No fresh mortar. Just blank, indifferent stone. I raised the flashlight again. The beam had weakened. It cast a sickly yellow glow now, trembling at the edges like it was afraid to stretch too far. I shook it gently, no change. Somewhere in the shadows beyond, that dragging sound had stopped. The laughter too. But the pressure, the sense of presence, had not. If anything, it was stronger now. Closer. I turned slowly in place, listening. Every small noise echoed too loudly: the soft crunch of grit beneath my boots, the faint rustle of my own sleeve, the distant arrhythmic dripping from somewhere behind the wall. The chamber was not large, but the darkness made it feel vast. Unmapped. Unfriendly. And then I noticed something new. In the far right corner, where the shadows pooled thickest, there was a door. Not like the hatch above. This one was narrow and tall, built into the stone with a crude wooden frame. Black wood. Damp. The surface blistered with what looked like old burn marks, some of them shaped like fingers. A rusted iron handle protruded from the center, twisted, misshapen, as if it had melted and hardened again mid-scream. But it wasn't the door that made my stomach turn. It was the smell. A heavy, metallic stench, thick and syrupy, that coated the inside of my nose the moment I got within 10 feet. I'd smelled blood before. I'd smelled sewage. This was neither. This was older. Like something had been forgotten in the earth. Like the door didn't hide a room, it hid a wound. I stood before it, not touching it, not daring to breathe too deeply. The flashlight beam flickered again, weak now, like it was running out of strength just by pointing at the door. I turned off the light. Just to see. Darkness swallowed everything in an instant. And yet after a few seconds I could still see the outline of the door. Not from the faint ambient light, there was none. The door itself gave off the barest suggestion of form, like it remembered being seen and refused to vanish. I reached out slowly, fingertips hovering an inch from the handle. And that's when I heard the voice. Not a whisper this time. A word. One word. Spoken clearly from the other side of the door. Come. It wasn't a child's voice. It wasn't angry or pleading. It was calm. Female. Like the speaker had all the time in the world and had used most of it waiting. I didn't answer. I backed away, one slow step at a time, never taking my eyes off the door. I turned the flashlight back on dim, yes, but still something, and swept the beam across the walls again, looking for another way out. Another tunnel, a hole, anything. But now I realized how wrong I'd been. This chamber wasn't just underground. It was beneath the house. Beneath the stone. Beneath the cellar. And it wasn't part of the original construction. The masonry was different. Older. Not just 19th century old, pre-foundation old. Uneven stones, held together with mortar the color of dried blood, in patterns that didn't follow any architectural logic I'd ever seen. The more I looked, the more it felt like the room itself wasn't built, it was grown. A cyst in the earth, hidden and feeding for generations. And then I heard the ladder. Above me. It was back. I didn't see it return. I just heard the wood creak one rung at a time under someone's weight. Slow steps descending. Not in a rush. Heavy. Deliberate. Every step echoed against the stone like a warning drum. I turned to look. Nothing. But the sound continued. Closer now. 10 feet. 5. I stepped backward into the corner near the shelves. My shoulder brushed one of the offerings, the doll, and it fell to the floor, cracking louder than it should have. Its eye rolled toward me. The other socket was hollow, filled with something that glistened wetly for just a second before I looked away. Then the creaking stopped. Right above me. I raised the flashlight slowly and saw a hand. It was clinging to the lowest rung of the ladder. Thin, pale skin stretched over long bones, fingers too sharp at the ends. Nails blackened. The hand just hung there, unmoving. No breath. No voice. No second hand. Just the one, resting like it had all the time in the world. And then the door behind me creaked open. Not fast. Just a crack. Enough for the smell to flood the room. Enough for the darkness inside it to feel deeper than the chamber itself. I turned. And something moved behind the door. Not step moved. Like fabric dragging over stone, like fingers against the back of your neck, like breath under the floorboards. I stared into that thin slice of black and thought I saw shapes tall, thin, the kind that don't need eyes to see you. The hand on the ladder twitched. I didn't run. I didn't scream. That would have made it real. Instead, I stood motionless, caught between the half-open door behind me and the hand on the ladder above. The air in that space was alive, heavy with something older than fear, something that felt aware. The flashlight in my hand flickered one last time, gave a soft click and died. I didn't even curse. I just listened. There was nothing. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Not even my own heartbeat. Just a quiet so thick it pressed into my eardrums like pressure underwater. Then from behind the door a soft, wet sound. Something dragging itself forward. The crack widened. I saw what waited in the dark. Not clearly. Not fully. But I saw enough. It was tall. Thin. Draped in something that looked like cloth but moved like smoke. Its face, if you could call it that, was smooth. No eyes. No mouth. Just the faintest indentation where a nose might have been, as if a face had been forgotten. It didn't walk. It didn't crawl. It flowed. It came through the door with the calm certainty of something that had never failed to reach what it wanted. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled backward toward the ladder, into the sharp smell of rot and iron, nearly tripping over the fallen doll. The hand was still there, resting on the bottom rung. But now there was another hand beside it. Then a foot. Then a face. A child. Small. Pale. Head cocked slightly as if confused. The features were off, not monstrous, not mutilated, just wrong. As though someone had sculpted a child from memory, but forgot the subtle, essential human parts. The space between the eyes was too wide. The mouth was a shallow slit that never moved. It blinked once. Slowly. Behind it, another appeared. Then another. They came down the ladder without sound, barefoot, their skin the color of candle wax, clothes damp with age. And they watched me. Not with anger. Not with sadness. But with the patience of something that had waited a very long time for me to come home. I backed into the center of the room. Surrounded. They didn't approach. They didn't speak. They just stared. And then the tall figure spoke. Not with words. With thought. It was like hearing something inside my skull. A whisper buried beneath layers of mud and time. You opened the wound. You are part of it now. I fell to my knees. Not because I wanted to. Because my body gave up. My legs felt like iron. My chest tightened. It felt like every nerve was being slowly unwound, one thread at a time. And then I remembered something. Something that hadn't happened to me. Not in this life. A hallway lit by gas lamps. A child's scream behind a closed door. My own hand, older, stronger, holding the handle, refusing to turn it. Choosing not to. You left us down here. The words weren't mine, but the guilt was. They poured into me like water into lungs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to wake up somewhere with morning sunlight and the hum of a fridge. But I couldn't. Because I knew it was true. The walls around the chamber began to shift. Not physically. Not like a movie scene. But in that subtle, horrifying way where your mind begins to see things that were always there, but you chose not to understand. The drawings weren't just sketches. They were memories. The dolls weren't just offerings. They were anchors. And the chamber wasn't a room. It was a mouth. A memory. A tomb that had swallowed itself. The children moved closer. Still not touching. Still not speaking. Just watching, waiting for me to join them. I saw my place in the wall, a hollow niche, dark and deep, next to the rosary and the shoe and the broken doll. Dustless. Ready. The tall figure stood behind them now, like a parent waiting to call the last child to bed. You are not the first. You will not be the last. The last thing I remember clearly was the humming. It came again, softer than before. Not menacing. Not angry. Almost gentle. It was the same lullaby I'd heard on the footage. The same tune that haunted my dreams. The same one I now understood, wordlessly, without question, I had once sung long ago to children I would never remember in daylight. I woke up 3 days later. On the lawn of the Grayson house. Covered in dirt. Face down. No tools. No flashlight. No memory of how I got out. No door in the dining room. I checked. I tore up the floor. Nothing but untouched beams and century-old joists. The authorities were called, briefly. They found no basement. No chamber. No children. The house was condemned. Again. And yet sometimes late at night I still hear it. The creak of a ladder rung. The soft sound of humming. And the faintest whisper just beneath the floorboards. We remember you. The end. Or maybe not. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this story.